Hello, and today joining me is my dear friend Hazel Murray, who for the last 14 years has made her home Cortona in Tuscany. So you really have been at the epicenter of everything that's been happening Europe-wise when it comes to coronavirus. So for you, Hazel, I know you from a long time ago when we worked together at Sky News, but as I said, the last 14 years, you've really been a resident in Italy. How is it there for you?
Well, where I am in Tuscany, and especially in rural Tuscany, I will point out we're not in the epicenter, which of course originally was up in the north of Italy. And even within Tuscany itself, we've had some quite high numbers, although I see we're starting to slip down the charts just a little bit. But the main problems were in Florence and Pisa, because of course tourists, airport, etc., etc. Now down here, well, I've got what's called a city up the hill, but by British terms, it's really a town. I've got two local shops down the road and then a little town village, a bit further down the road. And then there's a lot of fields and things. So it's relatively rural Tuscany where I am. So, there's that to set it apart. I feel really sorry for Italy because, and in some ways I'm angry at Britain because it should have taken the lessons of Italy and Spain and China. Now, poor old Italy, when it all started, and we all heard about it, but it was in China. It was so far away. We didn't necessarily understand the full significance at the time. And so Italy was one of the very first places to be hit. And I think...
Why do you think that was? Why do you think Italy was one of the first places in Europe to be hit?
I think if I was one of the top scientists, I probably couldn't answer that because it only takes one person, doesn't it? Off a cruise line, off an aeroplane, whatever, if that's a fairly sociable person, if they had it quite badly and did a lot of sneezing and coughing, or if they didn't have it badly enough that they even knew, so they were being, who knows why it came to Italy first. Maybe somebody does, but certainly not me. And of course, our government is not famous, I don't think, for joined up thinking, but in this case, I think in the main, they acted very quickly. Last I heard, and it's probably got worse since then, last I heard we had 66 doctors died. Now that is just tragic. For the same reasons, in some ways, that's the problems in Britain, not enough masks, not enough scrubs and all the rest of it. But as I say, Italy had no example to follow, so I think it did what it could. And the other thing that it did, which caused problems, but I'm not saying it did it wrong. In fact, I think it did it right. But when it closed down those northern regions, tight, with only a few hours' notice, but up there's a lot of migrant workers from the very south of Italy. Well, some of them were out of a job immediately, possibly without their back pay. They were out of somewhere to stay. Well, of course, they hightailed it back down to southern Italy. Of course you would, wouldn't you? I mean, I would. So many people trying to get home. And so we're just now seeing the numbers start to rise in the south of Italy, whereas, 2 or 3 weeks ago, numbers were insignificant almost.
So do you think through this time in Italy, because it's been a number of very difficult weeks there for the medical staff, and as you say, 66 doctors dying, that's phenomenally hard to digest. Why do you think still the numbers in Italy are high? Do you think it's to do with the profile of the age population? Is there something in Italian society or the joined up way of the different areas not connecting, or what they have on offer when you talk about the scrubs and the masks?
Well, almost the reverse, I think, because what I've noticed around me is that the Italian population has, to my great surprise, given how sociable they are and gathering in great numbers, they have really respected it and people are really taking it to heart. And I think it just all happened before anybody had got to grips with it. That's why I think poor Italy, and to an extent the same with Spain, but Italy and Spain should have acted as an example to Britain long since. You've seen the singing from the balconies in Rome, and me and my next door neighbour talk to each other. I've just been down to the local shop. I can phone up and put my order in, and then more or less when it's ready, you wait outside, and everybody's really polite and they don't queue in Italy. They just stand around and you make sure you know who the person is that you're following, and it's all Really nice. I used to be hugely sociable, but I think in the last few years I've become more antisocial. And especially at this time of year, I try and get a lot of work done, paperwork, tidying, etc., etc., so that I can have the spring, summer free to do whatever I want to do. So I have to say that for myself, not only am I not suffering, and I feel quite guilty about this, but I spoke to a friend here the other day. She's up in, no, well, she was in Florence, but she's actually in the country too now. And we both agree we're actually enjoying it. I felt like I was on a hamster wheel before. I did very little, trust me, but I still felt like I was on a hamster wheel. And I always said, if the world would just stop for 2 or 3 weeks so that I could catch up with myself.
Well, the world certainly stopped.
I feel that I have. Oh, hasn't it? It's surreal. I heard the other day, a third of humanity, it's probably gone up by now, a third of humanity is now in lockdown. So, but the thing that worries me, of course, I'm desperately sad for all the Italians round and about, all Italy, because let's face it, financially, Italy was not doing tremendously well economically. And I just don't know what this is going to do. I know that for every fortune lost, quite often a new fortune is made. But even so, so many restaurants closed. I mean, I know a person that he's in a different comune to me, so I haven't seen him recently. But he was given food from one of his local restaurants because they were just about to have to close down anyway. And they didn't, they might as well give it away as, throw it away. So I feel desperately sorry for everybody suffering emotionally because they've got relatives that are ill, physically if they're ill, and financially. But I think my biggest worry, because I spent a lot of time in Africa, I just don't know what's going to happen there. If we think we've got it bad, I just don't know what's going to happen in Africa. I don't know if you saw, it's been doing the rounds on WhatsApp and I dare say everything else that people do. It was a letter from an Indian doctor. And it said,
no, I never saw this. I know we're jumping continents, but no, let's jump to Africa. Tell me about the Indian doctor. What did he say?
Well, the point is, probably that Indian doctor was in Britain or somewhere, I don't know. But the point was, he said, if you're suffering or not enjoying lockdown very much, you're privileged. You've got a house to be locked down in. If you...
I did see this. Yes, it has made the rounds.
So many times a day, you're privileged because you've got water to wash your hands in, etc., etc. And I mean, there has been, of course, huge amounts of criticism of the British government for not having enough testing, not having enough masks, etc., etc., etc. And I'm sure there's some right in some of that criticism. But if you compare our system to what's happening in rural Africa, and it's not just Africa, India, and again, they had that terrible migration the same. And I'm sure lots of South America, I'm sure lots of places where life is more rural and less rich, less wealthy, less...
Life is never equal. And of course, I think we do realize, despite everything that's happening around us here in Europe, we are very privileged and lucky in the main. And we have good, in general, hospital facilities. But just thinking about the economic situation in Italy, what is the government doing for people who have lost their jobs? Because here in Luxembourg, there are some good incentives from the government to help people who are self-employed or people who have full-time work. There are various propositions put forward by the government to help us all.
Well, my friend is self-employed and she was going to see somebody yesterday to see what could be done. Maybe things have been a little bit slower here because, again, it's not perhaps quite so joined up. I wouldn't like to be hugely critical. This is my adopted country and I love it completely. We all know that Italian bureaucracy, not good. So in fact, when I had to get a new credit card, I had to sign 7 different pages, 7 different forms just to change my credit card because I'd lost the original one. In England, they just dish you out a new one. No. So I don't think it's as easy. On the plus side, of course, nearly everybody I know, because I tried to think, is there anybody I should be helping? Any old people or anything like that around about me? And I realised that really not, because of course the Italian family is so like this that I've got one old lady up here, but her family is visiting all the time because they're only up the road anyway. So I think that's the upside. And also, well, it used to be a joke. Well, it wasn't a joke, it was true actually. When I first came here, and I was in debit to my swimming pool company, till a year ago. And for a while, by quite a lot. Why? Because they preferred having a stranieri who owed them money than putting it in the bank. Because for one thing, they wouldn't have to pay tax on it. And for a second thing, they kind of knew that if they asked for it, they'd get it immediately. Whereas who knows what's going to happen with the banks. And of course, while I've been here, one of the banks that I was with was folded and a lot of pensioners lost a lot of money. So that was tragic. So I
Just
think,
picking up on two things. You spoke about the Italian family system, because your brain is running around about 5 different thoughts at once. And I thought I was like that. But just picking up on the Italian family, you did an incredibly brave thing 14 years ago. You moved to Italy on your own. And you were living there as a single person. I've absolutely no doubt you have a network of friends. But what is it like for you living alone in this period in Italy?
well, when I first came here, especially the old lady up here, obviously she was 14 years younger and her husband was still alive, but they were quite old, you know. She was often out in the garden gardening. She's a serious gardener, dressed in her black and her this and that. And I'm out in the garden gardening, but I'm in a bikini, a saggy old bikini. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure that they approve of me, you know. But I gave a party when all the work, wasn't much work, but there was some work done. And when it was all over, I gave a work, I think 84 people came. And it was, you know, for English friends, Italian friends, all the workers, everybody else. And apparently she said, do you know, it's been more fun here since she's been here than I can remember for years. So I discovered that far from disapproving of me, she actually, because this was a little hamlet that had somewhat died. I moved in here just at the same time as an Italian lady from Rome started up a B&B directly across my road. So it has changed. There's more kids around here. There is more life around here. So on my own, well, I've been on my own for 14 years. So, and as I said, this time of year, I tend to be a bit antisocial, but I still do my yoga, my belly dancing, just did yoga online. I've got a very small house and I kept hitting my head on the table because I was
It's not that small, Hazel. Trust me, it isn't that small.
It's 195 square meters. It's pretty small when you've got 4 dogs, 2 cats.
Coming to the dogs and the cats, this is the, apart from doing the yoga, the tai chi and the belly dancing and the painting and the gardening in your bikini, you also work in a kennel, and you ended up adopting 4 dogs. Like you say, 2 cats, was 3.
Can you see her? Because I.
Oh yes. Which one is this?
This one's Betty. Betty and her sister Doris were the last 2. And I went down to the kennels for a fairly ordinary Sunday morning walk, which we do on a fairly regular basis. And I got a fairly vociferous greeting, Azalea, you know, Azalea. And I thought, you know, what's all this? Well, it turned out.
Just to point out that your actual name is Azalea rather than Hazel.
No, it's Alethea Hazel, and somehow it got turned into Azalea, and that's fine with me because they tend to say Izel or Azel, which you may know this better than me, but I think in Dutch or German that means ass, like donkey. So I don't really want to be called that.
Ass, I think, yes, but I am no expert. Absolutely not.
So anyway, and they knew that I brought my first dog, Buster, up from 3 weeks old because I'd been asked to take him to the vet. And the vet had said, why have you been asked to bring him? He's going to die within 24 hours because his mum hasn't got enough milk. And in fact, 2 of his siblings had already died. And I didn't like the vet. In fact, I found him quite bullshit. And I said, so you're saying if I take him back to the kennels, he'll die? And he said, yes, he will. To be fair, he probably saved his life because he gave him one of those injections that put fluid in. So what could I do? I
had to adopt them.
Well, I took him to the bar, basically, and all the other people that were working there that morning with me, a sort of little expat volunteer group, one went off to get powdered dog milk, puppy milk, and another went off to fill in the receipts, what do we call them, the things that you take to the pharmacy.
Prescriptions.
Prescriptions, yes. And so, you know, I took him home. I had no idea. I managed to drop him, feed him cold milk. Then it turned out I was at every meal I was giving him what he should have been having in 24 hours. But one way or the other, he survived. So the day before, somebody had found 6 puppies, 1 day old, in a plastic bag in the rubbish. This is a year or so on from when I took him. And so the call had gone out. They'd been rescued. They'd been taken to a vet or something like that. I'm not sure. So the call went out, and I went, no. But then I realised, you know, because it's one thing feeding every 3 hours, it's a whole other thing doing it as much as these little creatures needed. But in the end, a friend of mine who's older than me, Liz Rigdon, she took 2. And I thought, well, if I take 2, I can't possibly become the woman with 4 dogs, because I'd actually got another little one as company for him, so that me and the cats could have a bit of peace and quiet. And I can't be the woman with 4 dogs, so I'll take 2. I used to set my alarm for an hour and a half. That's all I slept, day and night, for about, I don't know, 3 weeks, something like that.
But you are now the woman with 4 dogs and 2 cats, and you still offer your services at the kennel. And in fact, what brought me to want to interview you, apart from the fact that you do live in Italy, which is highly affected by the coronavirus, and yet you seem to be, as always, dealing with it in your own positive way and enjoying the antisocialness of it. But you did mention in your Medium article, which you wrote recently, and we'll link it to the end of this, that there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to animals and whether or not to pet the coats, and then what do you touch after that. And of course, many people have been talking about this when you go to a supermarket, when you touch things, what should you wash, what should you not wash, what do you start being careful with, and when does that turn off?
Well, ironically, the day before that, we go to Monday mornings to the kennels, and it was Tuesday that we found out we were going into lockdown. So everything had been pretty much as normal on the Monday. So certainly if it were transmittable via dogs' coats, there was every chance if somebody had it, then it would have been passed to us. Thankfully, it wasn't. Nobody really touches my dogs, although I do have a dog walker twice a week. He was their trainer initially, and I just realised I couldn't. 7 days a week is too much. I'm not a keen walker at the best of times. So, but he wears gloves when he comes, and he's got a mask on, and I've got a mask on, and I stay well away. But what concerns me, like I've got a cat, and Gizmo is everybody's friend, and he visits all the neighbours round about. So what happens if they pet him? Supposing I've got it, would they catch it from me? And vice versa. Well, I listen to Radio 4 all the time. And I was listening to Inside Science, and they touched on the subject, but they didn't quite get to it. But they said to go to the British Veterinary Society, something like that, website. So I did. And I fired off a rocket of an email to them because I thought it was absolutely appalling. I couldn't find my way around it. It wouldn't answer my questions or anything else. And to be fair, I got a reply, I think it was 2 days ago, about this whole fur, can it transfer from one to another? And so maybe my email had an effect, because it was the very next day that I heard the piece on Radio 4 about, well, it was this morning actually, wasn't it? And neither of us can remember what it said. But my friend, right at the beginning, she looked up about whether dogs can have it. Now, it seems to transpire that some dogs can have it, but she had looked it up and it said they couldn't have it, and I think I'm quite happy to believe that. But since I'm in lockdown and isolation, it really doesn't matter anymore. I do walk them still every day in the fields. I might be breaking the law ever so slightly there, but I could take all 4 of them out on a lead directly outside the house, and I'd be bumping into all sorts of other people who are in this, because there's no cars anymore, so it's almost like a square. And that really wouldn't be a good idea. So I just do what I've always done. I pile them straight into the car. It's a 2-minute drive to fields, and I swear to God there isn't another person within a kilometre of me, because I do it at lunchtime and all the afternoons are eating. And because they need to run. It's not the same taking them out on a lead. They need to run. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I might be breaking the law ever so slightly, but I never see a single soul, so I don't see how that could be bad.
Don't worry, Hazel, we won't tell anybody. Your secret is very safe with us. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us from your shiny, bright, sunny home in Tuscany, and we wish you well. We hope you will stay safe and well, and all of the animals that you have adopted and looked after. And we really hope that Italy can recover stronger than ever, and we hope to see those numbers in the hospitals there plateau very, very soon, not just for Italy, but
Oh,
across.
one final thing. We've still, in my comune of Cortona, only got 12 cases,
Uh,
which
12
around,
reported cases of how many? Out of how many?
oh, in the whole of Italy, you mean, or the whole of Tuscany? I'd have to look.
12 in your comuna, out of how many?
Yes, my comune. So that, you know, not just the town of Cortona, but so I'm not up there in the town, I'm down here, but I'm still in the comune of Cortona. And it also includes the whole of Camachir. So I don't know how, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at figures.
But it's a fair number of people. I mean, we're talking about
Well,
10.
12 is not very much. 12 cases in total in quite a large area. But we are fairly spread out, as I say. Although up there they're not. I mean, they're cheap by jowl up there in the town centre. It's an old Etruscan town with walls. But everybody is respecting the rules. And when it comes to it, that's what has got to happen.
Well, we wish you all the best out there in Italy, and we hope to see a really good, strong health and economic recovery for everybody very, very soon. Thank you for your time, Hazel.
Thank you.